Call of Duty is rigged, and I'll prove it in 10 minutes using a simple line of logic, with 4 major points that all prove each other and are verified by reliable and direct sources. I'll logically connect these points to each other to form a watertight case for why this game is nothing more than corporate suits hiding behind a once great franchise in order to psychologically manipulate you to squeeze as much money out of your wallet as possible. For so long, Call of Duty's matchmaking has been a mystery. They'll quite literally change anything and everything within the game except for the matchmaking. Just their refusal to talk about it alone is obviously suggestive of something extremely shady going on behind the scenes. And what's more, the fact that the one time they actually did talk about it, they just dodged every accusation we threw at them with deceptive and evasive language, proves that they are quite literally running away and hiding from us. But there are people like myself that do the digging. None of the answers we've found are pretty. However, if you want to figure out how Call of Duty's matchmaking is rigged to breed microtransactions, you've come to the right video. You might want to go and play one last game for nostalgia's sake, because once we're done, you're not going to want to play again. What a lot of players don't know is that the programmer that developed Call of Duty's first skill-based matchmaking system, Charlie Olson, did an interview about these algorithms and the impact they had on the franchise. He casually dropped 2 or 3 bombshells about the industry and Call of Duty that should have turned more heads. But I fear we've gotten complacent because of all the nostalgia baiting. Here's the first insane drop.
I almost like, why is it allowing me to suddenly have such an incredible game? And it goes back to the psychology thing where people say it's trying to keep you playing for longer. So it's like, here, have a good game, play some more. You know, I don't know if that's an actual thing. I believe it might be when you talk about retention, but...
That is part of it, but...
Player retention is part of it. So right there, we have a confirmation that the matchmaking is tailored in some way, shape, or form to breed player retention, which obviously in turn means that the game by definition is rigged, and his testimony is completely reliable, given who he is. The matchmaking is built in a certain way to make sure players don't quit. The bad part is that if you're unaware of this, you will run a super high risk of falling for it and getting addicted. So we literally have the guy who developed COD's matchmaking saying player retention is part of the model. Cool. Watch this next clip where he talks about a 3-bucket system.
And then put you into 3 different buckets, and then we try to match you with 1 bucket on like above or below. Middle could match with anybody, but like the low end would only match with middle tier. Basically, I mean, very rudimentary and with its own problems. So you'd barely notice skill-based matchmaking in that case. So I think it started changing in 2016.
Olson here is talking about a 3-bucket matchmaking system. Consider buckets like matchmaking brackets, where players can't match outside of adjacent buckets. There were low skill, medium skill, and high skill buckets where players were sorted, at least in the old days. This makes sense, especially if the buckets overlapped like he said. It would make for a pretty relaxed experience because if you were average or mid-skill, like the majority of players are because that's what average is, you'd literally be playing with everyone. So major point number 1 is that Call of Duty used to have a 3-bucket system, and this is verified and backed up by Charlie Olson being reliable as the original developer of this system, as well as widespread evidence of this being the case in older COD titles. However, this is where we start to get into some territory that is extremely condemning. Take a look at this leaked image of a data miner's findings when they investigated the code of Modern Warfare Remastered from 2016. Also, notice he says it changes in 2016. Huh. That's exactly when this image was leaked. There are clearly different matchmaking buckets where players are tossed into. Remember, buckets are just brackets. We can see right here a file called skill buckets, plural, which obviously is what Olson was talking about. A triple bucket system, a high skill bucket, a party bucket for players that are teamed up with friends, and look at this, advert bucket, an advertising matchmaking bracket. And this is where we start to get into some pretty questionable territory. Yes, what I'm telling you is that Call of Duty not only has multiple matchmaking buckets, there's also a completely separate matchmaking bracket for advertising. And that's it. So major point number 2 is that the advert bucket exists. This matchmaking bucket lines up perfectly with Charlie Olson's testimony, which not only suggests that this leak is completely legitimate as it came out long before Olson spoke out at all, it also proves that there is a matchmaking bracket within Call of Duty that is specifically intended to advertise to the player in order to convince them to spend money. And as all properly functioning adults know, all advertising is riddled with psychological exploitations and subtle trickery in order to convince you to spend money on whatever is being advertised. The fact that the file skill buckets actually exists perfectly lines up with Olson's testimony about there being 3 matchmaking brackets that players were sorted into in the older games. This file is from 2016, which is a year very recently after microtransactions were introduced into Call of Duty, not the least of which were loot boxes. Alright, that's all well and good, but how on earth would an advertising bucket actually work? How do you advertise within matchmaking? Within a match, even? Well, thankfully, we don't need to figure it out ourselves. It's already published by Activision themselves. I'm honored to present to you Systems and Methods for Driving Microtransactions in Multiplayer Video Games, the patent that started it all. This patent details a few methods that Activision desires to use to advertise and encourage the purchase of skins. In a blanket statement that covers most of what the patent details, it's literally just pitting players who don't have skins against better players who do have them in order to make it look like skins make you better, and to make you feel like buying skins makes you better. This functions in two very effective but abusive ways. The players who they want to advertise to will get tossed into a match with better players. However, the players that bought the skins in the first place are the better players. So this accomplishes two things. It makes the worst players think skins make you better, even if it's subconscious, and it makes the better players think that buying skins makes you a better, more confident player. The problem? Well, both players, the junior player and the marquee player, are playing in a fake tailored experience that is completely artificial and set up by the algorithm. The odds are already stacked, and the literal intention of the match is not to provide fun competition or entertainment. It's literally to manipulate the psyche of all parties involved. And it's right here in writing. Look, a system and method is provided that drives microtransactions in multiplayer video games. The system may include a microtransaction to arrange matches to influence game-related purchases. For instance, the system may match a more expert/marquee player with a junior player to encourage the junior player to make game-related purchases of items possessed or used by the marquee player. A junior player may wish to emulate the marquee player by obtaining weapons or other items used by the marquee player. Or how about this? In one implementation, the microtransaction engine may target particular players to make game-related purchases based on their interests. For example, the microtransaction engine may identify a junior player to match with a marquee player based on a player profile of the junior player. In a particular example, the junior player may wish to become an expert sniper in a game, e.g. as determined from the player profile, meaning they're profiling you, by the way. The microtransaction engine may match the junior player with a player that is a highly skilled sniper in the game. In this manner, the junior player may be encouraged to make game-related purchases such as a rifle or other item used by the marquee player. So here's major point number 3. A patent created by Activision that literally details rigging matches in order to breed microtransactions. Now, I said I'd make this Kate watertight, and I'll fulfill that promise. Think of it like this. We have information that is from sort of unreliable sources. First, a leak of game files, then the patent, which both could not actually be in use. However, because the testimony of Charlie Olson validates the information within the leaked image, we can completely logically operate as if this image is legit, because nothing the designer of COD's matchmaking says contradicts the information present within this image. However, for the case to be watertight, any potentially questionable information must be validated by a source that is completely reliable. Even though Activision created this patent, it doesn't necessarily mean they're using it. Now the final piece of evidence, one that's going to absolutely blow your mind. We've done a lot of digging, but it's left a single logical loophole. There's no way to prove that this patent is 110% in use, right? Well, wrong. There's one way to prove it, and it's absolutely insane. Take a look at this advertisement. Looks fairly normal, right? Well, let's not forget that Call of Duty was literally forced to admit they use AI to design in-game assets. And judging by past advertisements, they're also using AI to design these as well. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen this word before? Aside from me just reading it now in the patent. If you have, how frequently have you seen it? You've likely never heard it in conversation and never seen it in writing, or you've only heard it a handful of times. Well, let's call our attention over here. This advertisement literally uses the word marquee to describe the newest bundles in the shop for the season it's advertising, which is Modern Warfare Roman numeral 2, Season 4 Reloaded. Marquee bundles. The ones that the marquee players will use to advertise to the junior players in the rigged advertising matchmaking buckets. The same way the marquee sniper will decimate the players who are new to sniping because of a prearranged match outcome. The same way the word marquee is used 22 times in a patent that lines up perfectly with an advertising bucket, which is confirmed by the testimony of the developer that made COD's matchmaking. And what made this completely embarrassing slip up, using the same exact language that's used in the patent that would be super condemning to Activision's PR? The same thing Activision was just forced to admit they use because Steam made them admit it. So we know they use AI, we know this word is super underused, we know it's the exact verbiage used in the patent, and we know that no human being, if they're lucky enough to even think of using the word, would never be stupid enough to use the same verbiage in a patent that literally describes rigging a match in order to encourage microtransactions. So major point number 4 is the advertisement from Activision themselves that uses the exact same verbiage of the patent, fully suggesting its use. The chances that this verbiage is just a coincidence requires much more mental gymnastics than understanding that this correlation is very concrete and there is complete association between the two. So we have the words of the developer that created COD's matchmaking verifying a leaked image, which then suggests this patent, which is then verified by an official Activision advertisement that has an overwhelming likelihood of being created by AI that slipped up by putting the word marquee within the advertisement because it probably assumed players would understand that buying the skins would give them an advantage in game. The evidence is making it pretty darn difficult illogical to even consider that COD is still not rigged. The funny part is that COD being rigged has been shown to be true in many other ways than just this video, and I've only shown you 10% of the total evidence we can stack against the game. Here alone, we have a completely watertight case with every point within it being sealed by reliable sources and legitimate information. Call of Duty is the AAA equivalent of a rigged mobile game that stacks matches against you if you don't buy skins in order to advertise to you, and rewards you for buying skins by making you the walking advertisement. And given this leaked image is from almost 8 years ago, there's no telling how much more advanced the system has become. And we haven't even touched upon the game measuring engagement, dodging accusations, the game watching you through your camera, pre-simulating matches before they're played, and the game rigging patents. That's for another time. I'm Prime Pete. Stay safe out there, and take it easy.